Hi everybody, I'm Tara from Crooked Row, and today we're going to talk about if the crap hits the fan, or I hate that saying. We're going to talk about layoffs and a downed economy, but better than anything, we're going to talk about how do you prepare yourself for this, and what are 6 good tips and tricks for while we're all in a downed economy, depression, recession, whatever you want to call it, but we've got 6 tips for you. Let's get started. Okay, item number 1. The very first thing, whether you lose your job, whether you're just starting to realize that things are going, south in our economy, and you want to start preparing yourself for whatever it is to come. And I am not one of those that is very, very like, oh no, the end of the world is coming. One thing that I am about though is always being prepared for the worst. And so, not the worst like the apocalypse, but the worst like maybe someone in the house loses their job. Maybe your hours get cut. Maybe there's so many different scenarios that we can have at this point. And so the very first thing is see what money you have. So instantaneously, you're going to want to think about housing. Housing is the most important. Of course, there's water and food and clothing. I understand that, but as soon as you are starting to prepare yourself for this, you have to look at the money. So of course, the no-brainer is get out of debt. But in the short term, I would also be saving money. If you're bad at saving money, go ahead and just make, like, if you can, if your bank will let you make partial payments on your house payments, and very partial, like if you can only afford a certain amount, store that away however you can. Like if your bank doesn't allow you to make partial payments, my bank does, so you don't have to make like full payments, but you want to make sure that they're actual payments. So I know that financial analyst tells you to pay on the principal so that you're not paying interest. But if you have a very large, which most Americans have very, very large mortgages, and so like making principal payments is not really going to do for the short term, is not going to get you out of trouble. So you want to find a comfortable place that your household can survive. So, for some people that's like, oh, I know we'll be okay for 3 months, or I know I need to pay 12 payments. That's more difficult than you think it is. I have gotten us ahead in our house payments, and it paid off because my husband lost his job in December. And if you follow my channel, you know that last year in 2022, I actually quit my job. And so this is a very large deal for us. And I have for the past couple of months been kind of feeling what happens when there is no income coming in. So I would also, under the money canopy, I would really start selling non-essential items. So for us, non-essential items are, maybe some of the animals that we have. Like we have a huge abundance of animals, and so we might need to sell animals. If we have a tractor that sits in our garden that we don't use, and so we need to sell that. We need to sell, probably going to end up selling our baby dairy cow, for varying reasons of what has happened, like not just with my husband losing his job, but with things that are happening on the farm as well. So under the money category, I would, of course, as always, get out of debt. Stop spending money too. Like I think that people think that, well, I have this much. One big one is, and you don't think that it is this big of a deal, but one huge one is going out to eat. If you are going out to eat and you are trying to prepare for hard times, or you are trying to, navigate through unemployment, that is the wrong way to go. Like there are just too many tutorials on making food, and it is far cheaper to make your own food than it is to go out to eat. So right there, just, it's not that I'm not even saying like if you love hamburgers, make your own hamburgers. Like you can do it, I promise. So money is right out of the gate, money is the big one. Okay, number 2. I'm gonna start calling them victory gardens. That's why I made this number 2. Not that really it's the second thing you need to do, but I really love the whole idea behind victory gardens that they did in after World War I and World War II, or actually during both of them. And I love that they call them victory gardens, because I hate the whole like, oh, we're all gonna die. You know, I don't like that. And so I believe in a victory garden, and I feel like no matter where you are, if you're in an apartment, you can still have a victory garden. So my mom and dad had lived in an apartment, and they had joined a community. There was like, I mean, just a tiny drive from their house. Like it was like 30 seconds in their car. They drove to a community garden, and you could, for like, I mean, it was very, very cheap, like $8 a year or a season. They could do a plot. And when you do community gardens, you can also not just do a plot, but you can also kind of share, like if you have this huge bumper crop of tomatoes or squash or just whatever you're great at growing, and maybe you're not as good at growing peas, but someone within the community garden is, you guys can start sharing. And so I just want to caution you to really start looking at like the quantities, which I'll get into that in a minute, but starting the garden is the first thing. So even if you're in an apartment, I know a lot of New York City apartments let people put raised roof gardens on, or raised bed gardens on the roof. And I mean, there's restaurants in New York City that do that. So no matter where you're at, if you're on a farm or if you're in an apartment, if you're in a suburb, I mean, I know so many people who live in the suburbs, and I walk into their backyards, beautiful backyards, but there's so much kind of dead, wasted space that they aren't even utilizing. Like if you have children and they have swing sets and different things, I understand that some people have tiny, tiny backyards, but whatever your circumstances, I mean, I'm telling you, you can at least get one raised bed in there. Raised bed, containers, you know, don't forget there's grow bags. There's all sorts of ways for you to actually grow food. So the victory garden, you'll have to remember to buy tools. So while you are fresh, if your money is still flowing, or if you have no money, you need to figure out what tools exactly do you need. Now, if you listen to most people, they're going to tell you, oh, you need a tiller, you need this, you need that. You do not need all of those things. It's more work. So if you are wanting to, let's say you have no money flow coming in, I would say at the very base, you need shovels, you need a hoe, it would be convenient to have a rake, but not absolutely necessary. And we have something, actually I'm gonna grab it. So we have something called a groundhog, or a hound dog, I think it's called. Can you see that? I hope so. And you just kind of slam that into the ground, and you twist, 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 twist. And it really turns over the soil super fast. That and a shovel does really well. If you can afford a tiller, but just please don't forget, if you're getting a tiller, and it's not one of the manual tillers, which are very hard to work, by the way, but if you're getting a tiller, don't forget that you have gas cost and oil cost. So there are things to think about, additional costs as you move along. So the more like industrialized you get in your garden, the more money and the more things you're going to need. Currently, we only use the hound dog, the shovel, the rake, and sometimes we use something called a broad fork. And a broad fork can help when you don't want to actually like turn over the soil. You can dig that in and loosen the soil. Like a lot of times if we're going to plant carrots in the ground, we'll use a broad fork. So And then the other thing with the Victory Garden is you'll really want to learn how to compost. And so I think a lot of people fight doing compost. I put out a video, and we'll link it below, but I had put out a video about how quick and easy compost can actually be. And so you really want to do your own compost, because if you're struggling for money, or you're just wanting to save money so that you can put it towards other things, like all the things that we've been talking about, like house payments, maybe getting out of debt, things like that, and you want to make extra payments. I mean, you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on essentially compost. So the point with compost is that you will save yourself money and you'll improve your soil. And it's something that you have all of the items in your kitchen, and probably from your yard or your neighbor's yard or something. So please compost. So that's all for the Victory Garden, I think. Okay, number three. Number three is start to learn wild edibles. Now, wild edibles cannot save you. I've heard people, I mean, they can save you in addition with other things. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, you can survive on wild edibles. I don't think you can. If anybody watches Alone, you see you can't always just survive on wild edibles. So I know in a lot of areas, there is definitely wild berry brambles out there. There are definitely like wild fruit and different things like not cranberries, crab apples, and just lots of different things that you can look for. But there are things right below your feet that are amazing, and they are amazingly helpful. That sometimes you'll see, like even in the city, like sprouting up from concrete, which I don't know how safe those are. But these little buttercup flowers, those are edible and even medicinal. There's another like purple flower that sprouts everywhere. I've seen it in every portion of our country, in the city, in the country, everywhere. This little purple flower that pops up. And we could go kind of on and on. The reason why I'm not going into detail is because every area is going to have different things that are growing wild. And so that's why it's important for you to start. And I would because you want to be careful with wild edibles, I would start like with 2 or 3 that you learn really well, and you start to learn to identify them. And then I would, if you can, I would actually literally identify them. And so like there's something that grows rampant all over my farm, and it's purslane. And purslane I've seen everywhere. But purslane also has another plant that mimics it. And purslane is different though, because when you tear off the leaf and you break it open, there's a slight, like very slight, not milkiness, but kind of like a very, very, very slight, I don't know, slickness to it. So it's almost like aloe. And so you'll want to look in your area though and see, because like most of the country grows chicory. And if anything, I know that chicory can be a coffee replacement, which might be good in hard times. And we actually have dried chicory in my kitchen right now. So these things actually work. And you can also utilize so many of these flowers into teas. And so why would that be important? Well, if you really are in severely hard times and you're struggling with getting enough nutrition, teas and different things like that, and these wild edibles can actually help supplement for a lot of things like vitamins A, C, E, you know, these things. And vitamin D is pretty much going to be a sun thing, but you can get it in other places too. I'm just saying that if you are going to be going through really hard times, you might want to start looking at wild edibles. That's all. Good job, buddy. Mommy, they are? They are. What are they?
I don't know.
Oh.
All I know is they're just dots and he's blind.
Oh, goodness.
That's a monster.
That's a scary creature.
That's a monster.
Okay. Okay, number 4 is to start thinking about winter months. So I know that this can be kind of difficult, especially if you're new to this, but if you do not put enough away for winter and you have no income coming in, I mean, you get it. So I think that you have to plan on, can you get water in the winter? Now, people in the suburbs, you're going to still have city water. You're still going to have, you know, all of the kind of city amenities. Out in rural areas, if you have a well, or like we sit on top of an aqua bed, and so we have, like, even if we had to do a well ourselves, like, there is plenty of water to get here. Now, all the things that you would have to do to get it, but I kind of feel like that's more of like an apocalyptic viewpoint, like being without water and all of that. I think we're going to be okay with water. But how do you get your water to your garden? It could be a big one. So especially sometimes when things, you know, sometimes things get rationed. So you have to just think about those things. Can you still plant through the winter? You know, some people who live in our country, they can plant all through the winter, some partially through the winter, some just cold weather crops. Where we live, you cannot plant in the winter. I mean, you can grow in the fall and protect those plants and kind of inch them away through the winter where you can still actually eat from them, but the growth is so slow that it's minute at best. So you actually have to know how long you're going to be without the garden. And that sort of is like a really good point. Sorry, I'm turning the page. I didn't want to forget anything. Is you have to be realistic about your supplies. So like, if you have no canning materials and you don't have a dehydrator or a what's that? Oh, what does Jason have? What's that machine Jason's got?
Freeze dryer.
Okay, thanks. If you don't have a freeze dryer, if you have no way to preserve, or a smokehouse, or I mean, the list can kind of go on, or a freezer. There's multiple ways to keep your stuff. And so if you don't have any of that, you need to start preparing yourself to purchase those things. And so if you have no money coming in, then you're going to have to go back to sort of old ways. Like, you know, I know that there are people who will take like wire mesh and they'll sort of make like a type of preserves and essentially make homemade fruit roll-ups. But they do that with jerky, and they can do that with tomatoes and different things like that. But even when you do those things, you're still going to have to find a way to keep it preserved if you don't have some sort of preservation. You also, if you're going to do canned food, actually this is with any preservation method, you really need to realistically sit down with pen and paper and figure out how much do you need. Because I used to say like, oh, you know, we'll need about 20 quarts of green beans. And then I discovered that, and this is just normal circumstances. This is not even, we're in a bad way. But I have 6 people in my family, and 2 of those are big, strong wrestlers. And we go through at least 50 quarts of green beans in a winter. And if we have a long winter, which this year, yay, we're not supposed to. But you have to figure all this up. It's all the math that you have to do in order to see how you're going to make it through. So that is a big one. And then that will also go back into the first suggestion of how much money do you need? And and maybe it's as simple as, you know, selling some of the things that you have. Maybe you had 2 cars and one of you is going to, you know, tend gardens and animals, or if you're in the city, maybe, you know, both of you are not working, or one of you can take public transportation or walk to work. Hey, sell that car, and now you've got money flowing for supplies that you need. And don't forget that you need seeds. So if you're just starting, think about the things that you eat and what you can grow. So these are so important. Okay, this brings me to number 5, which is make sure that you have the equipment that you need for hunting and fishing. So if you don't eat meat, you're good. You don't even need to think about this step. But if you do not eat, or if you do eat meat, then you're going to want to make sure that you have plenty of hunting and fishing gear. If you have fishing poles and you're like, oh, I've got so many of these, really start adding up how many hooks you waste, how many bobbers, you waste, how much line do you waste. And I say waste because we don't think about those things because we can just go get them. So think about that. Hunting equipment is going to come in many forms. There's people who do traps. There's people who do bow and arrow shooting. There's people who do, they use guns. And there's many ways that you do this. But also within the hunting and fishing gear, please don't forget that you also need everything that you need to slaughter. So the sixth and final suggestion that I have is that you're going to have to figure out how to feed your animals. I mean, if you're keeping animals, I mean, people in the suburbs have animals. You have dogs, cats, you have, and a lot of people feel that when it's, such a bad time, they can get rid of their animals. But if everyone is in a bad way, who are you going to give the animal to? So, and hey, I feel like animals are like family members, so I'm one of those that would try to figure out how to feed them. And so like, let's just take our chickens. So chickens are pigs, and there was a couple years back that we actually started thinking this over and thinking, if we weren't able to get grain or feed or scratch grains or and we couldn't produce enough in our garden, like let's say that we got feed corn, and we cracked that for chickens, and maybe we had wheat and some other thing, and millet, different things to like help with their diet. What else would we do? Because ours are pastured, so they do receive a lot of bugs and they get greens from the grass. So, but what do you do if it's winter, And so my son had actually come up, and I thought this was pretty brilliant. My son Christopher had started looking up, what do you do? And one of them, and this is so gross, but it's called a maggot bucket. And so you just take something that is rotting, and it could be vegetables or it could be like a carcass that you've eaten. Gross. And you take a 5-gallon bucket, you put holes in it, and then you put that rotting material in it. Flies will lay their larvae in that in a heartbeat and start producing maggots. And the reason why you put holes in the bottom is because the maggots tend to drop out and the chickens will eat it. And if you can have these kind of strategically placed all over where your chickens are, it really does help. And so I'm saying to start figuring these things out. Again, some of it's going to be the area that you're in. Like we can dig for, we are flush with worms here. So if we had to, we could dig for worms for our animals. That would be a lot of work though. And so you do have to figure out not just one way, you have to figure out a wide variety of ways to take care of your animals. So if you aren't able to grow enough for them, and maggots and worms aren't going to work, and I'm talking about even livestock, like all of our animals are grass fed. And so, but what happens through the winter when you can't get hay? And so these are important topics to go over. I know that there are people in really desperate situations where in the fall they would even go and collect leaves and give leaves to their starving animals. I don't think I could do that. I would have to like beg, borrow, and steal to feed our animals at least some version of hay or silage or something. But this is a good wake-up call. None of us want to go through these things, but being slightly prepared, you're never fully prepared. And so because you're never fully prepared, just remember that there are other people going through this. We're going through this right now. And so there are other people that are going through this as well. A company around here just laid off 15,000 workers. And so there's lots of people who are going through this right now. And so you're not alone. But there's hope, is why I wanted to put this video out, is you've got to be able to roll with the punches. And so after your feelings are done being hurt, there are so many answers, and there are people who are doing this right now as well. And so you know, we have that spirit about us. We just make it. So we will make it. I didn't want anybody to worry. So I decided that we would share, you know, the little bit of personal information of what's going on in our house, and that my husband lost his job, and so we're in a very difficult way right now. But I did do things to help cushion the fall. So there you have it. There's my 6, and those are just 6 suggestions to get you started. There is like a bazillion more, I know. So I wanted to kind of get people's minds started in that direction. I know there are lots and lots of videos about, you know, an apocalyptic kind of thing, but history kind of shows that it mostly is not an apocalyptic type downfall that people have. It's usually recessions and depressions, and it's kind of a slow roll that we go through. And so I just wanted to encourage you to even share. I always say this, but it's so true. With us, share with like people in your community, reach out to other people. We all need each other desperately in these hard times, and we'll see how much more it's going to dip or not dip. But I just wanted to let you know that, you know, if we can survive through hard times, anybody can. Thanks. Bye.